Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Heather Holm, author of Bees, an identification and native plant forage guide. Heather, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Are you ready to get started?
I am, yes.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I think the one piece of advice that comes to mind is to be honest about your strengths and weaknesses. If you're writing a book that needs photographs, for example, you will need to plan on hiring a professional photographer if you are not one yourself. I think one mistake people make is anticipating that they can cover all the bases themselves.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think the hardest part when you send out proposals to publishers is conveying to a publisher that your book idea is novel or unique. If it sounds remotely similar to an existing title, they're less likely to be interested in publishing your book.
And then with your book, was it traditionally published or did you publish it yourself?
I actually sent out proposals and had already pre-designed my two books and decided that I had done 95% of the work myself already. Mm-hmm. So I ended up forming my own publishing company and produced the books myself.
Yeah, funny thing with that. I mean, you end up going through the process and you realize, you know what? I can do this myself. Because there really isn't that much of a difference these days between traditional publishing and doing it yourself. Because either way, with the exception if you go Penguin or Random House, those publishing companies still expect you to do the lion's share of your marketing.
Oh, absolutely. And I had a graphic design background, and my books are based on field guides, natural history guides. So a lot of, intricate design of the book, and I had some ideas of how I thought the book should be put together to make it the most user-friendly, or for the most user-friendly way possible. And at the point of time, I just didn't want to give up that freedom that I had to do it myself.
Yeah, and it makes such a difference being able to do it yourself. With my first book, I was able to finish it and have it out there within a month. And it makes such a difference when you have that creative freedom where you don't have to wait for 6 months, a year, or even a year and a half to go through a publisher. You can do it yourself and get it out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then you're also not pressured with a specific deadline, which maybe is bad for some people, but you can really work on a book project over the time that you have to spend on it, rather than being pressured into a date 1 month out from where you are.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
I think for my first book, one of the things that I did that worked really well is I started a blog several years before I wrote my first book. And I built up quite a large audience through the blog and then through the associated social media pages tied to the blog. And that was a really useful thing for me because once my first book came out, I already had a large audience to easily market to. And they were familiar with the things that I wrote about and were, in a sense, an easy sell. They would be interested in buying the book.
How many people visit your blog or did at that time?
I actually don't recall. I no longer write on the blog simply because I don't have as much time to do that. But through social media, I built up about 12,000 followers, which was extremely helpful. You just get even 1/3 of those people sharing something on social media and it really takes off for you.
Yeah, having that platform early, like how you've done and building it up, it really makes a huge difference, especially when you're ready to launch your book and to get the word out.
Absolutely. And it's one thing that, as you know, publishers are looking for when they're vetting authors, whether they already have an audience or not. And that could be play a large role in whether they entertain your book proposal.
Yeah, my previous guest on the show, she was actually talking about that. She had a huge following on her blog, and she had a traditional publisher reach out to her. And through that, they ended up doing a deal together. So it's just so funny how that ties in now, because you have all these publishing companies, they want people that already have a following, and they're actually pitching to you. And it's just so funny how that works now.
Yeah, you never would imagine that happening, but that's wonderful for the people that do get contacted by publishers.
So when you're doing your launch, you're mainly utilizing social media. What social media sites were you using that you felt worked best for you?
Well, at the time, Facebook was the known quantity for my first book, and that's where I built up the largest following. I more recently have joined Twitter and Instagram. It's really a taxing piece of, it taxes your time, the more platforms that you join and are committed to posting to. So I was really careful about sort of limiting my amount of time on social media, but also making it posting as often as I could to continue to engage the audience.
And how often were you doing posts?
On Facebook, I was doing posts probably 3, 4 times a week, which in some people's opinion, it probably wasn't enough. But when you're, spending time doing other work, that seems like a lot doing that and coming up with the material too. That's part of the challenge. You want to make it engage. Everything that you post, you want to make it engaging. I do less sharing of other material and try to post most of the material on my social media accounts being original and from me. And that's not because I don't want to share other people's work, but I want to give the audience a sense of what's unique about the information that I can provide them.
Well, and your information clearly is very targeted as well. We're talking about bees, because clearly that's a very niche market.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have both my books have sort of combined bees and flowering plants. So that certainly broadens the audience. People who are interested in gardening, people who are consider themselves naturalists or conservation professionals. So and that's the beauty of a bee. Their life is tied to flowers. Many people are obviously just interested in the gardening and flower part of the, part of it, but tying the two together has really worked well for me to broaden the audience for the books.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Oh, well, I can't really distill down what my favorite book would be. I'm a big fan of natural history writers. Bern Heinrich is probably one of my favorite authors. He's published many books, natural history books. And through reading his books, he had really taught me how to be more present in and observant of the natural world. And I think for a lot of people, we go about our days and we don't really slow down and smell the roses, so to speak. We don't really observe and take a look at what's going outside in the natural world. And his books really gave me the tools to do so.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I think I'll quote Bern Heinrich, and he said, "Talent lies not in our genes, but in our minds." And what I like about this quote, it essentially says to me that we all have the potential to write a great book, only if we set aside preconceived barriers and forge onward.
Well, Heather, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Listeners can find me online and on my website, www.pollinatorsnativeplants.com. And from there, you will find links to my various social media presence or accounts.
Well, Heather, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul. It's a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.